Welcome. Thank you for joining me for this Christmas in July tutorial. In this tutorial, I'm going to show you the processes I use to make 3 different vintage Christmas postcards. So let's get started. The first project that I would like to share with you in this tutorial will be making Christmas tree postcards using raw edge applique. In this method, I have used Heat and Bond Ultra Hold. Because of this type of heat and bond, you will not be able to quilt or do any type of needlework or machine stitching on the raw edge appliques after they've been applied to the project. So keep that in mind. In this project, I have my applique pieces that I've already cut out, a more modern fabric and a more traditional, and this is definitely vintage. I found this at a garage sale, and it was from a quilter that had been passed for some time, and her son had told me that she had rooms and rooms and rooms full, and that these were at least 30 years old. So I picked this one up because it was more traditional looking. So I wanted to give you 2 views of using different type of fabrics for this process. I'm going to go ahead and put that aside. What I have for you here is a prepared piece of a sandwich quilt top, and it originated from, and you can see the pieces that I've cut from, a vintage Damask napkin. And what I love about Damask is, and this one's Holy, so perfect, it's not brand new, although I am not one to deny using a brand new napkin. But these are perfect to practice your projects with before you use something that is more valuable or is more sentimental. But as you can see, these napkins are rather large. And so I can basically make 2 cards out of a quadrant of this napkin. But I want you to look at the detail in the weave work of this damask. And I love the sheen. It provides a beautiful underlayment to any type of project. If you've been following me, you've seen me use these for Christmas stockings and wall hangings. And I think that they're just beautiful to use. If you use a large motif, you're going to get more of the weave design that's in them. And if you're going to do background quilting, of course you will lose that, but you can get a combination of both. But for this project, that's what I'm using, is one of these damask napkins, vintage damask napkins that I have cut up. And you can easily find these in thrift stores or Goodwill. They're not expensive, so if I'd say average $2 a piece. It might be more in some areas, might be less, or you may have some in your cupboard, or you have a family member or friend who has gifted you some and you don't know what to do with them. This is a great project for that. So what I have in front of me is the prepared sandwich for this project. It consists, just like any quilt sandwich, of a backing fabric, and this backing fabric happens to be a remnant piece from a vintage pillowcase that I cut up for other reasons, and I always saved what's left over because they make great backing pieces, or you can keep them for wonderful strip quilts. It's 100% cotton. It's wonderfully constructed and made from that time, so it's just a perfect choice for other projects besides using as a backing. I'm using an 80-20, in fact it's a Quilter's Dream 80-20 batting, and I have my piece of Damask already glue basted. I have used my favorite basting tool for small projects. It's just regular school glue. I got this at a boxed office store, and it's clear, washable, acid-free, and it's non-toxic. So make sure that if you're glue-based, this is the type of product that you want to use in your work. I have taken my template tool here. This is a 5x7 template that I have. It has registration marks to help me find the center of what I'm looking at. It has a dotted line that I'm going to put my hand there. A dotted line that represents the area where my satin stitch is for my postcards, and this solid line here is the 1/4 inch mark. So I like to use this when I'm doing multiple pieces on a piece of fabric, and what I do is I will lay it down and I will grab my marking tool, and in this instance I happen to use a Crayola Take Note, and please make sure that your package says washable on it, because there are two types. There is a regular Take Note that is permanent, which there are ways to remove it, but if you get the washable, it will easily come out with a soak in your sink or your tub or whatever you're using. I've been using these for years. I've never had any issues. The secret to marking on this particular project is I don't want an accurate mark, okay? I want my marking to be a smidge more than what the actual template is. So when I make my mark, I make sure that the fat edge of my pen, not the pen tip, but the fat edge of my pen is laying against the template, so that when I make my mark, it's going to give me a smidge more, a few millimeters more outside of my actual template where I will want to make my cut later. And the reason why I do it that way is so that it gives me more area to fill, because I want my quilting to fill past where I'm going to actually be making my cut. And then when I'm ready to make my cut, I do want to go in and do a thin stay stitch around the perimeter of my postcard. This also gives me a visual aid if I want to do two different type of quilting designs. So I will be showing you something that might be fun and whimsical and a little bit more advanced for some quilters. Whereas on another section, I may just do a simple crosshatch to show the beginners that you don't have to have crazy quilting skills to get this project done, that it can, in its simplicity, it can be just as lovely when you finish it up with embellishments. So let's move on. Now that I have this quilt top ready to quilt, I'm going to go ahead and put it aside, but I want to talk about one thing that's very important that also kind of segues into the third vintage postcard Christmas tree project that I'm going to be sharing with you today. You may be asking about damask, because I'm going to bring over some of this cut fabric. It does have, unlike cotton, it does have a lot of play in it. It's wiggly. In small projects, and I've used them in a little bit medium-sized projects, but in small projects especially, when you use the glue basting method, it's pretty secure. There's enough structure here that you won't have any issues when you're quilting once you've glue basted it down. That being said, when you do go to glue baste it down, you want to make sure that you have everything stretched and in place the way you want it, because if not, you can skew the designs a little bit. And if you take a look at this quilt top here, it does have a design that is linear in it. So when I laid this down and did the glue basting, I did try to make sure that this was as straight as possible. Although if you're doing a lot of dense quilting, you're not going to see any kind of distortion. But if you want this to be an element in your design, then you want to make sure that when you lay it down, you've got it glue basted down as straight as possible. So that's just an extra tip. Let's move on to some fabric that I have been wanting to use for quite some time. I have used a piece of it before in another small project, and that was fun. And it goes to say that this one doesn't play nice all the time, and that is silk. What I have before you is an applique that I made. Believe it or not, this is also out of a piece of vintage damask. I have hand dyed this with ink tints, used a method where I painted more of a watercolor effect on it first, and then I dampened the tip of the pencils. And these are not watercolor pencils. It's dried dye that is the core of the pencil. So please remember that when I say hand dyed, I do mean that this is dye. So I took the tip of the pencils and dampened them, and then placed dots to make the lights or ornaments, whatever you want to call on it. And then I went in and free motion quilted my quilting design and put a secure edge on it and cut it out. So there's actually a backing and a batting layer, just like any quilt sandwich. And this is the applique that I'm going to be using for this project. So there's another idea for you to use those damask napkins for. But let's move on to the fabric that we were going to be using for this project, and that is silk. I took a look at this tree, and every fabric that I put up against it just did not do the artistry of it any justice. So I took a leap of faith and I ordered some silver silk. And to give you a tip, silk is expensive, and I chose one of my newest methods of trying out fabric. I bought a mulberry silk, 100% silk pillowcase. It's a queen size, and I cut it up, and it's just so luxurious and soft, but it is very thin, and it does not play well by just glue basting alone. In fact, I would not recommend it so thin, like you can almost see through it. It is so thin, I would not recommend applying glue to this fabric directly. Okay, what I have done is I have stabilized my cut piece of fabric, and here is my fabric. And if you can see from the difference that this had, that it is a little bit more stiffer, although it has drape and flexibility. And the reason why is because I have used Pellin's PLFB 36, which is a fusible interfacing. The key is it's ultra lightweight. Not a lightweight, it is an ultra lightweight, and it is meant to be super flexible. If I take, oh, I have some out already. It is meant to be super flexible like fabric. All right. This is what I use to make my needle turned applique, because I want the flexibility and I don't want that super stiffness in my applique. So this is the product that I use. It works just as well as other stabilizers, but it gives me that flexibility, and it's also much easier for my dense quilting to go through and make an impact. So this is what I used. I cut it out and I laid it on the back. I followed the manufacturer's instructions, so you can see that I've applied it to the back of my silk. I've trimmed it, and now that I have this stabilized, it's ready to glue baste. So I already have the bottom of my quilt sandwich. This is again 80/20, Quilter's Dream 80/20 batting. This is again another piece of vintage pillowcase that I'm using for this project. I don't like to waste, so it's a beautiful cotton fabric and it works well. So I have that ready to go. I am going to lay this on top, and I'm going to get my clear, washable, acid-free, non-toxic glue, and I'm going to glue baste it down. And this is how I do it. It's so simple. I never put a crease in my fabric, okay? You've already got it all ironed out. We want to keep that from getting wrinkled. So I just come and I stroke my glue up until before it starts creasing, and I gently roll it back, give it a nice press. I'm going to, this glue does use it quite fast, so I'll pull that up to give me some more glue. I'm going to lay this over again, and I'm going to protect this edge so that I don't crease it. And I'm just going to give me some nice long strokes and apply the glue. Roll it down. Give it a nice press while I smooth everything out. And while I wait for that to dry, I am going to line this up and show you what it will look like as a postcard.